Excited to be here with you guys. James and I were just talking. I guess both of us come a little bit from a different perspective. I'm mostly in the paid social world, consumer brands, e-commerce, direct-to-consumer, but started my career in ad tech, and so I found it very easy actually going into direct-to-consumer after having a bunch of context on how ad tech works and operates. And James, you want to give a quick intro on your background?
Yeah, I've always been on really kind of the walled garden social network side of advertising, and so I think the guys from Imperium are probably here, but talk to them about. There's really like ad tech is really two distinct sort of sets of ad tech in some ways. There's like the open web, which I feel like has been really kind of East Coast dominated, and then there's sort of the walled gardens on the West Coast. And I feel like I'm based in LA and sort of kind of was raised in sort of that environment, but now at Comcast building Universal Ads, which is sort of an attempt to kind of combine the two. So that's kind of where I come from.
Amazing. And James, because most of the room is ad tech here, can you tell us what we need to know about direct-to-consumer brands that are trying to get into this world of ad tech and now biting at the ankles?
Yes, you're no better than me. I would say that when I talk to these brands, the main thing is that they're just incredibly economically rational. So like they'll try anything as long as it works. They really don't though understand ad tech. They really don't. Many of them have never used a DSP. Many of them have never really paid for ad tech fees at all. Like if you look at the supply chain and how much of it is monetized via the demand side, the social networks really kind of don't play at all in that game in terms of that fee structure. So when talking to those brands, I think the big kind of question for them is like, I just want to buy these ads. Like, how do I just, like, I know how to buy Facebook ads and I can get Facebook ads, and if I want to pay some fee, I will. But like, how do I do that in TV? That's been the big thing where we try to help them understand that like, now hopefully with what we're building, there's a way to do that, but it's definitely a different approach than what they're used to.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is everybody's down to spend 10 grand and test something and try it. But they are, or I should say we are, very much focused on like the performance KPIs. So, if you were to tell somebody who works at a consumer brand, a digitally native consumer brand, that real time equals 1 week, they would probably just walk out of the room. They want to know real time. Black Friday, we have hourly check-ins on ad spend and impressions and click-through rates on ads. So everything kind of happens in actual real time there. But now going into kind of this world of ad tech and consumer brands, why is now the best time to rethink about TV?
Yeah, I mean, I think for TV, again, I think this whole room probably knows, but like, there's a bunch of people working on making TV as accessible as like an Instagram ad. Like we have our own flavor on it with what we're doing with Universal Ads. So I think that's probably reason one. It is now super accessible. You can use a credit card. You can start to test. You can get real-time feedback, basically like at the speed of the equivalent of like the Meta Ads API, right? So like now we're finally kind of keeping the same score in some ways in terms of how it all works. And then I think the other reason now is because the creative barriers have come down so much, right? Like, as you know, like the idea that, Gen AI creative isn't like perfect yet, but it has totally changed the bar in terms of what you can do. And when I talk to brands, the big thing for them, I tell them, is like, just try to think about this as a horizontal 15-second or 30-second ad. Like it's just an Instagram ad that happens to be on the biggest screen in the room, and it's not skippable, and it's around all this great content. But like, this doesn't have to be this totally overwhelming thing.
Yeah, do you see, we'll get to that in a second, but what are your thoughts around like TV historically being more of a brand spend channel? And here's my IO and I want this many impressions on these channels, and this will hopefully contribute to sales.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of ludicrous, I think, is like the honest answer. I think what's happening now, and ironically, it's kind of the walled gardens that have shot themselves in the foot a little bit, but we're at this point now where I think most brands will use a third party for measurement, right? Like incrementality testing, in particular, incrementality measurement is sort of like the main currency when it comes to these D2C brands. And they've gotten to that point, not really because they wanted to, but they started to add up all the conversions in all the ad managers and realized that it was basically showing 5 times as many sales as they actually had. And so the walled gardens kind of overplayed their hand. I was at Snap for a long time, and we probably contributed to some extent to that. But I think because of that, there's no trust in first-party measurement anymore. And so when that moves into third-party, TV actually gets to shine. And now that sort of that, I would say, like train sort of left the station, I think, TV gets to get the credit it's probably always deserved. Now, it was way too expensive to buy, and the barriers were too high because the creative format primarily. But I think, if you look at it now, there's really no reason why, it should be treated any differently than the social networks.
Yeah, when I was at a beverage company called Hint Water, and when I joined, I took over e-commerce, and we were spending probably, $100,000 a month on Facebook, maybe 20 on Google, and zero anywhere else. And by the time I left, we were spending about $2 million a month and probably mid six figures on TV. But our barrier to get to TV was so high. It was a $100,000 commercial shoot and a $60,000 remnant TV buy with an agency that was basically placing the buys directly. And the barrier to entry was so low. The only brands at that time that were on TV were insanely funded venture companies. But it was a huge hack because you could basically flood the market with awareness and then pick it up with social or search. How do you think brands should think about TV as a part of their media mix today?
I think it's the same way, but just way more integrated. So like what we say, and this is a little kind of blasphemous, probably saying it from the Comcast perspective, but is like TV is the new second screen, and that's totally fine, right? Like from a human behavior standpoint, people are buying things on their phones, and none of the clickable TV stuff really works. And so it is about how do you use TV to drive impact on a phone and also make social more effective from these brands' perspectives, because it's going to be 90% social budgets anyway. Oh, Jeremy, what's up, man? So I think that's how they have to look at it, right? I think like TV does a great job of finding incremental reach, driving incremental sales, and it does make all your media perform way better. Like we see that every day. It is a total fact, but you have to measure it holistically. And then I think it has to be able to be transacted on the exact same way. So like as you're context switching from like building your TikTok campaign to your Instagram campaign, you really have to be able to go ahead and just like take that learning and drive that into your TV campaign. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be a bigger percentage of the spend of a brand's going to put towards TV. I think like we're going to gain share, but I don't think it's a replacement for social or anything like that.
Yeah, I think if anything, it's TV is an amazing channel layered on when social figures out what funnels work really well on the brand side. I'm curious, like from maybe a few years ago when you were building ad tech at Snap to now, what has changed that has allowed you to now build this type of platform for a channel like TV and plug into, so many places of inventory?
I think the thing that's changed is probably, like I think the walled gardens won. Like I think that, Ari has the, we've had this on I think podcasts before, but like there's a question of like what's happening with the open web and the walled gardens, and I think that's sort of been settled in terms of at least how consumer spend is actually going. And so as a result, you can go ahead and really kind of embrace this sort of ads API approach, and that has now made TV really accessible, right? So like I think that has been big. I think when we were doing Snap, it was like unclear what like the was it going to be like, could Snap stand on its own? And even though Snap's had its issues, it does $5 billion a year of revenue as a walled garden, right? So like things with scale can definitely generate demand. I think, TV has now figured out it can embrace that. And when you start to embrace that, you start to then think about, okay, well, like my job here is to actually derive value for the advertiser. So I think TV's had sort of, because it's just been sort of separate a little bit, like in the brand world and with the holdcos, there wasn't like a ton of empathy for the advertiser. They weren't necessarily like trying to make it where it was an always on channel. And so you had things where like, broadcasters are like charging like for targeting, right? First party targeting, they're like taxing you. Where like in our world, you would never tax someone for making the ad more relevant. It means it worked better and they'd spend more. And so I think like that mind shift is sort of coming into play now.
Yeah, it makes sense. I just lost my train of thought there. But
is that good?
Yeah, you stumped me there. Okay, well, I'm curious, like another thing is, this is what it was. So TV as a medium hasn't necessarily changed that much. Like it's still, if you go to a Diageo or a Bacardi and you tell them you want to run TV, their whole strategy is, okay, we're going to spend 6 months on the creative. Some kid in Brooklyn is going to finalize what he thinks is the best for the country. You're going to rip it out, put it on TV. It's going to run for 6 months, and then now we're going to analyze it for the next 6 months by the time the next creative's already out in market. And With social, it's kind of the opposite. You can basically start with 100 pieces of creative and slowly refine your way down to one. What's changed that has now allowed you to build that way, where you can start with volume and test your way into what is the actual creative that works, versus before you couldn't necessarily do that? Is it just the way in which you share reporting is different? Are there technological differences? Are there advantages you have?
Yeah, I think part of it is because we've adopted sort of the social networks sort of API structure and sort of ad manager set, even to the point of like the campaigns, ad sets, ads, like all of it is set up now the same way, so you can start to think of it in the same way. And so like what we see right now is we've finally gotten brands to sort of stop being so precious about the commercials and let them fail. Like start pumping out a bunch of different creatives and learn. Like that's how it works in social. And that is definitely like a mental sort of change for them. But like if you talk to people at Meta, they would tell you creative is the new targeting. Like if creative is the new targeting for Meta, it is definitely the new targeting for TV, right? Like it's the biggest advantage we have with TV is the creative. And so I think now you're starting to see, okay, like let's pump out a bunch, in our case, Universal Ads is like integrated with Marpipe, like Dan's company. So you can do like dynamic product ads for TV. Like you can start to do all the things that you're used to on social, which has made social so sticky. And so I think that is, it's sort of, if you look at kind of the TV advertising industry, at least, for the year and a half that I've been into it, like there really are two distinct ones. There's like the traditional TV buyers at the holdcos that are using the DSPs, and I think, command 95% of the spend on TV, or some massive amount. And then there's sort of this new cottage industry that like us and others are trying to create, and they approach it fundamentally from the totally opposite perspective, right? It's like, it is just, they couldn't look at it
results
differently.
First.
It's results first. It's like unemotional in terms of like, if the creative didn't work, screw it, next, right? Like they're, targeting is, it's all custom audience based. It's all the things that that social can enable, which is just different than how you would have looked at it probably traditionally in TV even 3 years ago.
Yeah, I think honestly, one thing you said earlier was that TV is a second screen compared to social or whatever's on your phone. And I think that mindset is what is probably the best mindset to go into TV buying with, because again, if TV is your second screen, but you're focusing everything to make it the one big campaign creative, it's just never going to work. Yeah,
and it's we have there's a brand next week that's going to start testing some stuff with influencer content tied to TV. But if you're running TikTok campaigns, you have like local influencers that are going into like local Erewhon and like stuff like that. They're going to start doing that for TV. Right, and so you're like, oh, okay, like why would we treat this any differently? Like, right. And that will crush. Like, right. I'm like very confident that's going to work well, but it is a total different mindset, and it has to be. I think like you're going to see the thing on TV, and then you're going to see the next story on your phone, and like it has to be integrated, and like just because it's horizontal and longer doesn't mean it has to be different.
Yeah, I think one thing too with connected TV, with streaming TV, and also just ad platforms doing their thing, is people are starting to see less of a difference between the creative they see on their TV screen, when they're watching YouTube TV, versus the creative they see on their Snap ad or their TikTok ad or Instagram ad. Have you seen that also sort of dwindle down, and that help the TV side in terms of creative? Like you can now basically put, social level direct response, which is still storytelling first, on TV, and it's not weird. It doesn't have to be this crazy, Ashley Home Furniture style campaign.
Yeah, it's making a huge difference, and I've seen. We had, for Universal Ads, we had an advertiser who was like purely testing kind of the narratives on TV, and then was taking that to actually turn into the Instagram ads, which is kind of interesting because you would have thought you would have started with Instagram. But they're like, oh, well, this is sort of the top of the funnel, so why don't I have this be the first step in the storytelling? So like, I don't know if that's how it'll end up. I still think it probably will be social first and then extend. You'll build your business on social, you'll get scale, you'll go to TV to go ahead and get incremental scale, and then you'll come back and retarget on social. I think will probably be the flow. But the fact that you can do those things now is the exciting part, right? And it's just like TV does not have to be this, like, it's like TV almost made it like too special. And so like as a result, if you look at like the TV industry versus social, there's like 10 million Facebook advertisers. There are like 30,000 TV advertisers. And so like, part of that is access, part of that is the tools, but part of it is just a mindset where people have been told you can't do that. And like, I think that's changing.
So, CMOs for the longest time have been signing papers that say they're going to get delivered a number of impressions for a fixed cost, and that checks their KPIs for their quarter. What do you think people have to unlearn in order to successfully navigate this kind of next generation of TV buying?
Yeah, I think one is sort of like forget about the pixel. The pixel should be used for targeting, not measurement. So I think like once you sort of buy into that sort of mentality, then you're like, okay, well, like how am I going to keep score? And I think that's where you start to get to a lot of the incrementality partners. So I think it's probably leading there. A lot of marketers I've talked to recently were people who were like measurement PMs at like social networks previously. So it's interesting. Like I feel like it's becoming so technical and sort of scientific that like it's going to create. Now, I think they probably are losing some of the creativity in the process, but I think there's going to be this sort of the CMOs of sort of this next generation are going to end up in reality being like measurement product managers, right, for your business. And so I think like if you're not
almost like budget allocators.
Yeah, and if you're not like, I think if you don't have that skill set, I would learn it, and then I think probably once those people become too academic with it, they need to learn how to be creative. So it'll probably come back around. But I do think that is definitely a shift in how it's changing.
Yeah, I think only thing I'd add there, just because this happened to me in the world of paid social. When I was selling paid social, I spent probably 3-4 hours a day inside Facebook Ads Manager and learned that you could target dudes going to Vegas on a specific date and sell them tickets for something. And I would imagine CMOs of a lot of the brands who are signing with Universal probably don't even go into the platform themselves. Maybe they're buyers.
We're 100% self-service, so it's like you couldn't pay us to pull a lever for you, so that's good. So I think we're forcing them to do it, right? And like, but I do think when we tell them, oh, you can like target based on viewership behavior, like what kind of things do people watch, or like you can do custom audiences. So like, what do you mean? It's like there's no reason why this has to be so different. Like it's all. Now that it's all connected to the internet, can be all the same. So I think, if like it's the kind of irony is like when I'm talking to brands and you like ask them to raise your hand, like have you bought TV? Like very few hands raised. And then I feel like when I'm in ad tech rooms and I'm like, have you bought a Facebook ad? Very few hands raised. And so there's like some like convergence of the two that is happening now. And I feel like the ones that kind of meet in the middle are going to end up doing the best.
Yeah, totally agreed. Last couple questions. I'm curious where you think, AI is already a part of your platform. I can throw in a Facebook video that's doing well, and you guys will upscale it to TV. Generative AI comes out with a new model now every 2 to 3 weeks. Where do you think in 6 months to a year we're going to be with generative AI and TV creative?
I think it's going to be great, but I think it is definitely not ready for like full-on black box, like sort of automation. I don't know if people saw that like Meta this week turned a true classic ad for a guy's jacket into a grandma wearing and it was like, it was kind of clever because I guess it created a new audience for them, but it was also ridiculous. So I think there's a little bit of like pump the brakes to some extent. And I think it's far enough along where it's gotten the barrier out for the brands. It's like now they can do it. And you play around with Sora, like you can see how good it's going to get. But I think, for now it's going to be just a lot of testing and iterating. 2 years from now, I think it's going to be wild. Yeah.
And last question for, let's say you're talking to somebody who's just got into the industry of ad tech. What kind of advice would you give them of what to focus on or what to study, what to learn for the next 6 months? Like where can they go and spend an hour a week and invest their time so that 12 months from now they're grateful they did?
Selfishly, I would try to get a job at like Universal Ads, Spotify, or Discord. Yeah. I think like
why Discord?
That crew is incredibly talented. And they have a really interesting ads business coming up. But I think people who have like kind of embraced sort of the walled garden, hedge garden playbook, I think are really good places to go learn, and that have really unique kind of creative formats. And like I think TV, Spotify, and Discord are good examples of that. I think that's an awesome place to learn. And then from there, you can leave monetization if you want to. I'm going to be ad tech, I guess, forever at this point, but other people do leave it at some point. Yeah.
Amazing. I think for me, I would just say the generative AI tools and being able to build workflows with AI is probably where I'd focus. Guys, that's all the time we've got. Thank you so much.